Well, welcome everyone. We're here to talk about our experience doing undergraduate research at FIU. I'm Catherine, and I'm here with John as well, and we're going to share our different insights that we have from our experience doing research. But first, we want to thank FIU and UPE, as well as CAHSI and SHP for this opportunity to be able to do the workshop and to share these experiences with you, because we believe that research is very important and it's definitely a worthwhile experience, which we'll get into in a bit. But first, we're going to share a little bit about us.
Hi, my name is John. A little bit about me. I'm a senior at FIU. I've done research for high performance computing, specifically for bioinformatics, at the site lab at FIU, and some technologies that we work with over there are C++, Python, and CUDA.
And I'm Catherine. I did research in mixed reality, or I guess you could say augmented reality. I worked for the NUI Labs, which used to be called OpenHDI in 2018, but now it's called NUI Labs, and it's part of Colorado State University. And the technologies I worked with was Unity, the Microsoft HoloLens, C#, LaTeX to write and publish the conference papers and posters, and also the HTC Vive VR headset. And a little about how we're going to go through this workshop is that first we're going to go over what is research and what exactly is it composed of. And then we'll see why we do research in the first place, or why you should get into research. And then we'll see what is that research process and what can you see if you start doing research depending on the different areas. And then we can see the impact on the career and the society and how to get started. So first, what is research? I know for many people that maybe if you haven't had experience doing research, it may sound like just a buzzword that people say to act like maybe they know everything or they're geniuses. Or maybe for some people, it's nothing that really is meaningful, that they can just like look up on Google and find information and that's it. But not exactly. Research is a lot more than that. And to put it in clear words, research seeks to answer questions you can't look up on your own or to develop things not yet created. So this is not just like you're coding and then you go to Stack Overflow and you try to find an answer. Research usually comes about when someone introduces a topic to you, or you're watching a movie, or something happens that you start to get interested in a specific subject. So whether it's you're just talking to someone and you realize you're wasting so much food and you're like, how many people actually do the same as me and waste a lot of food? And then you start researching and finding out statistics and information about it. And then you try to see if there's something you can do to help solve that problem. Or even in those scenarios that maybe someone just tells you that things are a certain way and you wonder why it's that way, or why you can't keep improving in that area, that's a great chance to start embarking in research and seeing what it is that you can do to help in that area. With research as well, you can develop things that have not been created. So you don't necessarily have to just write research papers or like just start like doing things that are not related to coding or things like that. You can actually create products, hardware, software, and you don't have to be working for a specific company or industry. You can just be doing it for research, so to prove a point or to raise awareness. So now that you know a little bit about what is research, I'll go into why do it in the first place. When I started doing research, I never really thought about going to grad school. I thought maybe I could get a master's, or like maybe if I was really passionate about something, I would get a PhD. I currently am not planning to get a PhD, but I for sure do want to get a master's in the future. And research is great for that. It really does prepare you for graduate school, as this whole process of being able to get into a problem area, do a hypothesis, everything is kind of the same that you would do in a graduate level. And all of the papers that you write, all of the research process and experiments are very similar to what you would do in a graduate level. And even if you are not planning to go to graduate school, it really does open up your mind and give you transferable skills. So whether it's working with a team or trying to manage your time independently, trying to like plan ahead and see like how you can reach your goal by learning what it is that you have to learn and actually doing the whole process of investigating, all of those skills are going to work in whatever area you're going to be in the future, whether it's in the industry, whether it's in an internship, in your a normal job, in your daily life, the way that you see things. All of those skills will definitely transfer, because now you're not looking at the world that's just how things are. Now you're kind of looking at the world like maybe there is something that I can change or something that I can contribute to. So those are the first 2 points. Definitely, it will prepare you for graduate school and give you the transferable skills. But research also encourages free thinking. And by that, we mean that it's not just about what you see in the news about, let's say, what's happening in Texas with that they don't have electricity and stuff like that, or that everyone's buying electric cars or things like that. You're not just, when you start doing research, or at least the research thought process is that you don't have to accept how things are. You have to do the research on your own, and you have to see what are the numbers out there, what are the populations that have been interviewed and like done research in. What is it that I can do to be able to get rid of any bias that has happened in research in the past, or what are areas or communities that have that people haven't really taken a look at. So those are definitely things that opens up your mind, you creating your own world opinion, and just being able to, yeah, express your thoughts and be able to just do something that you're passionate in without just doing it because someone is telling you to do it. So now I'll pass it to John to explain the other points.
Yes. So aside from research helping you prepare for continued education, transferable skills, and free thinking, it also encourages you to build a community. It allows you to be with like-minded individuals. A lot of people have this preconceived notion that research is kind of done in a vacuum, and it's just like you like working on like ones and zeros, like in computing, for instance, just like all day by yourself working. In fact, that's probably the furthest thing from the truth to what actual real life research is like. You're going to be communicating with not only other researchers in your areas, you can also communicate with sponsors and other entities out there, such as the government or private sectors that are actually interested in the results of your research. Maybe they don't have the time to do it themselves, so they'll find you. And you'll find yourself in whatever space that your research kind of leads you into. So it's kind of like you kind of like positioning yourself into a community where everyone's interested in the same thing you are. The fifth thing that research does is it encourages boundaries being pushed. Like what's considered possible is always expanding, and it's only expanding through research, implementation, and experimentation. Research encourages us to experiment and try out new ideas, something that hasn't been tried out before. In fact, the whole premise of research is for you to try out something or tackle a problem in a way such that it's never been tackled before. So what you're essentially doing is kind of standing on the shoulder of giants and kind of like raising the bar of what the state of the art in science and technology looks like. And the last thing research does is impact society. So at the basic level, everything that we have in society and advancement all starts from some research in some form or another. It starts with some hypothesis, some testing, experimentation, and results being analyzed. We look at what research has done for a community a little bit later in this in this workshop, but just know that research is very crucial to the development of society, and it will be just as important in the future in order to maintain the level of growth that humanity has later on. So if we can go on the next slide.
So the research process. Now, this is kind of general. It might differ in different types of research that you do, sorry. But it always starts out with identifying the problem that you want to solve. And doing this, it may come from either yourself, something that you've known that you're passionate about, that you know you really want to help in this area. It can come from also a professor saying that they've been working on something and they're kind of stuck and they don't know how to get past it. So maybe the skills that you have in certain areas, whether it's AI, whether it's mobile development, like any different area, they may come to you and say, I need your help in this process. So in different ways, you may be faced with a problem, and it can be either tech related, it can be psychology related, it can be in many different areas, and that will be the first step. But after they give you that, you're gonna be like, well, I have no idea how to solve this. I have like no experience, maybe like this is a problem that you guys have been working for like 10 years and you want me to solve it. Like, how does that work? So you have to get familiar with the problem area. So like, what have people done in the past to try to solve that problem? Has this been going on for years? Has this been happening just in FIU or in UF, in Georgia, and like any part of the US? Like, what is it that we have to know about this problem to be able to tackle it? So that's where you start looking at related work and reading research papers that people have done or talking to people in the community, depending on what the problem is. And then you can start formulating a hypothesis and a research question. So that's when you can say what it is that you want to how you're going to be tackling the problem, or how you expect to be tackling the problem.
So the next part of the pipeline is the experimentation phase. In the experimentation phase of the research process, we answer the following. We start to mock or implement and kind of experiment with the hypotheses that we have. So this is where we start our coding process, our designs, our experiments, our user studies. This experimentation is kind of like the methods that we're going to be using in order to analyze our results, which is the fifth level of the process. So the results is it's what comes after the experimentation. It's what did your experimentation yield? So we're looking at plots, we're looking at improvements or the actual feasibility of our hypothesis. And this is where we analyze whether or not our hypothesis is correct or not. And then after we verify that our hypothesis is correct and our research yielded interesting results or results that the scientific community can benefit from, then we move on to the last step, which is peer review and publication. We submit papers or submit research findings into publications or other peer review sites in order for it to be kind of established and credible in the scientific community. This is where other peers in the same space kind of view the results and analyze whether or not it's correct, or if it's a solid research, meaning that there's no holes, there's no hard assumptions, and everything is end to end from the hypotheses to the experimentation to the results. And yeah. That's the research process.
And if you're curious to know how this process works in action, we can go over it later and to give an example. But now we're going to talk about the impact in the career. So there are many impacts that it has on your career. These are just a few of them. But definitely, if you start doing research or once you have conducted research, it doesn't have to be for 4 years. It can be for 1 or 2 years. And in that time that you do it, you will definitely gain deep knowledge and experience in the subject matter. Because as opposed to, let's say, working for a company, doing a project for your class, when you do research, you may feel a little bit lost sometimes because you don't have someone telling you what the answer is or where to look for it. This is something that people don't know the answer. And that's the point of research. You're the one that has to bring in all the knowledge that you have from that subject area, and you're trying to add something to it, to the whole collective knowledge that the world has on that subject matter. So, all of that experience of you trying to investigate, you trying to put your knowledge that you know about, like let's say you're doing AI research, knowledge that you know about deep learning or certain models, and you try to see which one works best that people haven't tried before, or if you try to change something about it, that's when you'll see that after that, all of that research is done, that you would have become very knowledgeable in that. You also make a name for yourself because now you're not just anyone that has worked in that subject. You're not just a software engineer or anything. You are a researcher and you are someone that has tried to tackle some of the hardest problems that people have tried to tackle and that they don't have answers to. So that says a lot about you and what matters to you because it shows that you are passionate about certain things and that you want to give back to the community. Um, and you can also pave your own career based on your interest. So if let's say you're interested in a specific area, like let's say mixed reality, augmented reality, and you're not really sure what it is that you want to do in that area, you can pave your own career based on that. You can see what it is in that area of augmented reality that has to be part of society. Like one of the hardest problems that I had doing research with augmented reality is that there weren't so many applications to it. Like the only ones that I would see was maybe showing like a clip of someone trying to like do something in a car or something related to education. But what is there more that can enhance like our daily lives? Like at least for me, I saw augmented reality as an opportunity to be able to transform like the like the things that you see around you and try to make it better and enhance it. So it's not just about putting like a VR headset and trying to take away the reality of the world. It's actually saying this is your reality and you can do something about it to make it better. So whether it's with COVID, like trying to do a teledoctor thing to help people that need that, whether it's people that are trying to envision like how they want their house to look like or how they want a city to look like without having to invest in actually buying all of that infrastructure. There are many ideas that came about just from being able to do that research.
So the last 2 points on the impact on the career is that it opens up exclusive job opportunities. Um, like I've mentioned before, when you do research, you're going to attract a lot of eyes to you, depending on how crucial the problem is to society. So you're going to get a lot of sponsors from places such as Microsoft, Google, or wherever. And if you continue down the research path and start to build a name for yourself, um, these companies may hire you on board just to work on that niche problem uh, for their company, for their research. So it actually does open up a lot of opportunities for you. Even if you're not sponsored by a company in research, it helps tremendously to have on your resume. Some recruiters are always looking for these niche kind of areas Like for HPC, for example, not a lot of undergraduates are doing high performance computing. Not a lot of undergraduates know how to code in CUDA. So if you have this on your resume, you companies see that you're young and you know these skills that are used by everyone, then you're going to be granted opportunities over a lot of other people. Another thing that it does, it enables you to expand your network. When, like I mentioned before, research fosters a collaborative environment and allows you to be open to a lot of other people just as interested in your work as you are in theirs. Um, so this in turns into a network of professionals that you have. So when you work in the same research lab as someone, you then have this sort of familiarity with who that person is, and they can speak on your behalf as to what your work ethic is. And it can kind of build your network. Who knows where your lab partner may end up working? They may be the next CEO of Google, and they worked with you firsthand. So if you're looking for a job at Google, you know the person who used to work with you. Sometimes life ends up that way. So
Yeah.
that's the impact on career.
Now, impact on society. I can't really specify enough like how crazy of a year 2020 was, not just for me, for everyone, as like the entire world. And research had a huge impact on that. And it has a huge impact in getting us out of that through the COVID vaccine. So research definitely impacts society because if we didn't have researchers that were working even before COVID started on these type of vaccines and trying to see what happens when we have a global pandemic or any pandemic at all, then what would happen to society? Would everyone just like get sick and that's it? No. Research says that, at least like from a research point of view, it's this is the world that we live in, but we can go and overcome that, and we don't have to be in this way, and we can do something to change that. So the COVID vaccine is one of the biggest examples of that. But you see that in any other area. You don't. It doesn't have to be in specifically with vaccines or biology. But you see that with 5G networking, that most of the phones now are starting to have 5G. Or you see that with additive manufacturing, like the people that have 3D printers, and then it's now just 3D printing, like whatever, like it's 3D printing, like pieces for cars, for buildings, like very important things. And all of this just came about from people doing research and showing that things can be done when um, maybe they didn't actually put it into practice, but they actually, through a research paper, through studies that they did, they showed that it was possible.
Research also has some of the more kind of like not so bright aspects impact of society. Because of research, a lot of problems that we face in society are actually being exacerbated. We look at the problems with deepfakes and kind of adversarial AI, how we've used the advancement of artificial intelligence kind of like to um, enable like more the negative desires of humanity. Now we see deepfakes kind of morphing into this huge problems, so such that we can't even trust videos anymore or audio clips that we find online. Research has also enabled misinformation campaigns. Yeah, fake news may seem like this thing that this kind of buzzword, but it's actually very real and it's very strategic. And a lot of it is actually very algorithmic and based on research for psychological and computer science studies. We also see kind of like the more like recent impacts with the COVID tracing. We saw how fast Apple was able to implement uh, coronavirus tracking into their phones based off Wi-Fi signals. So this leads to kind of like a more positive impact in giving us the ability to kind of assess a very dire situation that we find ourselves today. So to summarize this slide, we've determined that research leads to innovation, and this innovation in turns to affect society, whether it is positively or negatively. Research can shift potentially socioeconomic dynamics. What I mean by this is we look at researches in climate change. We see that this is actually changing kind of the landscape of kind of who gets access to what. We see entire nations' GDP go down, like Nigeria, because we find that maybe natural crude resources like such as oil isn't that good for environment. So international pressure kind of like decreases the demand for oil and natural resources. So this in turns like has an effect on the people living in these countries or areas where they're heavily dependent on these things for their well-being. It also facilitates a collaborative environment. I cannot stress this enough. We see globalization on the rise because of research. May I remind you guys, Einstein is not American. Einstein helped build the first American atomic bomb, but he came from Germany. Globalization at its finest. And we see stuff like this happen all the time. People from all walks of life everywhere on the globe comes together to solve one problem, be it positive or negative. So that's the impact on society.
So how to get started? You heard a little bit about the impact that research has and how to go about it, but it all starts with being curious. At least like if I give a personal anecdote about how I started, my interest wasn't just augmented reality or using the HoloLens, but it was about trying to give back to the community and trying to solve real world problems. So whether it's using augmented reality or doing a mobile app or doing a website, it's starting from the problem. So it doesn't really matter what technology you use. At least if you're in computer science, I would recommend to explore all of these areas. And you don't have to know exactly what you're going to do. You just have to know that, hey, I'm interested in helping out in this problem. And what is the best tool that I can use to be able to solve that? And you don't have to be an expert. You can be someone that maybe doesn't have experience in that area, but as long as you're willing to learn and be surrounded by people that also want to learn, then you're gonna be able to do it. You don't have to be like, I guess, the smartest in the room or anything like that. I think even if you before you start research, you can talk to people about the research that they do. You can see how it is like their day to day and see that it really does start from the problem. And that problem is what's going to get you to continue doing research for a year or 2 years. And then you'll see maybe you want to continue doing it in graduate school. Maybe you want to continue to do research during the summer. But it starts from being curious. And after that, you have to narrow down what are your interests. So once you start seeing all the research that there is out there, and you find something that maybe you really do enjoy learning about and you want to help out with, and maybe you have this idea about like, I haven't seen people use this technology for that, then you try to put the pieces together and narrow down these interests. And then you can see what are the research opportunities in your community. So I'll pass it to John to explain that.
Yeah, so you gotta be proactive, kind of look for research opportunities in your community. Now that coronavirus isn't really a thing, I mean, sorry, now that coronavirus is a thing and we're not bounded by geographical location, our community is huge. It's the internet, essentially. It's everywhere. So a little bit backstory to how I got involved in Site Lab was I just simply did a Google search on FIU computer science labs, and I scrolled down all of the labs and reached out to the one that I found most interesting, which was high performance computing sides lab. So like, yeah, so that goes on to my last point. Again, I encourage you guys to be proactive. If research is something that you want to do, reach out to these people. So I found a lab, I sent Saeed an email expressing my interest. You'll be interviewed. Typically it's not like a coding interview or anything. Just interviewed on your interests, your academic performance, standing, and how you can manage the time. And if the professor likes what he hears, then you're part of the lab and you have a little bit of pocket change while attending school. So yeah, these are kind of the steps on how you can get started, at least at FIU. So you heard like Catherine's story and my story of how we got started. Yeah.
But for some final thoughts, yeah, you heard John. We started kind of in different ways. I also kind of like I didn't do a Google search. I actually found out through talking to people and being able to get in contact with that professor where he interviewed me and we spoke about what it is that he does research in, and I found it very interesting. And he also saw that I have potential and gave me the opportunity. And this can happen to anyone, and it has happened to many other people. So it definitely is about going out there and just putting yourself out there and saying, hey, I want to help out and I want to do this. And you don't have to be a senior to do it. I mean, I was a freshman when I started. So for me, it was an awesome experience. And I think that if you guys want to know a little more about it, I'm free to talk about it as well. Um, but but yeah, we're here to answer any questions and about research or about anything related to what goals are, and if research could be a part of that.
So any questions you got for us right here? Kind of maybe you want to know how to get started. Maybe you want to know a little bit more about the research process. We can talk a little bit on that.
Or if you're not interested in research at all, you can let us know.
Yeah, or like give your reasoning why you think research is like bad. Like, no, I'm not interested.
How was the workload?
Um, John, do you want to go first, or I can go?
um, I'll let you go first. I'll follow up.
So the workload, it depends on certain deadlines. So it can either be like, usually if you're getting paid, you work a certain number of hours per week. So you set your own schedule. You don't have to work like for 40 hours. You can work for like 10 hours and that's okay. So it depends really on the deadline of the project. So at least for us, I started working in April 2018, and they wanted to be able to complete the project by December. So during that summer and during like the semester, I will go and do research and do user studies and start learning and all of that to be able to do it by December. But I wasn't working like 40 hours a week. But you do definitely have to put in time and talk to people. But it's mostly talking to the professor and setting a good schedule so that you're not super overwhelmed with what's going on, but you can actually put in enough work that you can get something out of it.
Yeah, piggybacking off of what Catherine said, yeah, it's pretty chill. My lab was kind of like paper heavy, so I like wants to push a lot of papers out, like 3 a semester. But we're undergrads, so a lot of professors understand that we're not as experienced as some of the other members of the lab. So the workload is kind of like adjusted to however you can contribute to whatever research you want to contribute to. For me, it was a lot of scripting, kind of like learning the basics and just kind of like helping out where I can. So again, like if you're getting paid for it, you do have to dedicate some hours for it, but most of the time you can work with your supervisor or the professor, whoever's in charge of you, in order to make it kind of manageable for you.
But I would say that it doesn't really feel like work. Like when you do dedicate a certain time every week to work on your research, you kind of start to look forward to that. And like when you're doing schoolwork and stuff like that, and then you start thinking like, hey, I have to go to the lab or I have to work on this. It's something to look forward to because it's not just about the research work itself, but it's also the environment. even remotely or in person, if you get to talk to the other people in the lab or the professor, you do feel yourself to grow a lot more. And you start learning about things that you didn't even know about before. So yeah, it doesn't really feel that much like work.
Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question. So this is more towards like personal experience of each one on their labs and on their research. But I've always been curious because I've tried it so many times and I haven't been able to understand like a single thing when it comes to like reading papers. Because maybe like, for example, I'm assuming that in your experience in those labs, maybe the professors have given you like a paper or two like to read and graph like information and then talk about it. So what would you say is the most meaningful thing that you look for when, you know, reading a research paper from another research that's going like in conjunction or has a lot to do with what you're doing?
So I think, let's say that you start working on a research and the professor does give you the research papers. You shouldn't spend, I would say, too much time trying to get into all the nitty-gritty of the paper, because then it starts becoming like you're working on that paper versus your own research. So for me, when that happened, I focused on understanding the paper. Sure, there were some things I didn't understand, like there are certain equations or things like that that they figured out that they don't really apply necessarily to your research. So I would say the most important thing is to realize what exactly they do differently as opposed to any other research that is out there in that area, whether it was using a specific model, doing a specific process differently, like what is it that was different from the rest? And then piggybacking off of that and seeing what it is that you can do differently from them based on what their conclusion was on the results. So definitely you shouldn't worry too much about specifically what their research was, but more on how all the other things fit your solution and your problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with Catherine. For me, that was like kind of the hardest part too. What I did to kind of overcome that is I would always like schedule times with kind of like the person that was overseeing me, which was a PhD candidate. He would like help me read the paper. He's like, okay, so if we're working on this research and we're reading a paper about kind of like a protogenomics paper, we're only concerned about, it's going to talk about this and this, like as we identified in the abstract, but we're only concerned about this portion. So it's kind of like what Catherine says. It's like you have your own research. The only thing that that research paper that you're looking at is to serve to help you is to identify the methods or whatever description that they have in there that is relevant to your problem. So sometimes papers may be very relevant to your problem. You may want to read everything about it just to make sure you're doing things differently. Sometimes there's only like 1 or 2 paragraphs in there that's really relevant to your problem. Another thing that I should mention is the notation. Like kind of like you may like see like weird, crazy math formulas or algorithmic notations. This honestly, it takes some practice. It's kind of like programming. Like the more and more you like practice it, like go over it with your advisor or professor, the more and more like you become comfortable reading it. So like anything, practice helps.
But definitely don't do it alone. I mean, you can, but I would really recommend to, when you don't understand something or you're not sure about the paper, you can ask your research professor or people around you that have experience reading research papers, and just tell them you don't understand. And that's going to help you a lot. Just being honest about what you know and what you don't know, because then you're going to get, yeah, there's certain things you can't just find online. So just talking to people about it helps a lot. And like John said, like sometimes you can even reach out to the person that wrote the paper. Like I remember for SparkDev, this wasn't necessarily lab related, but we had to go kind of a lot based off a research paper that a Google researcher did. And we actually reached out to her through email and she responded, and I met with her through like a Zoom meeting, and I was able to ask her all my questions because she was the one that wrote the paper, and she kind of helped me to dumb it down a lot. And yeah, like I think the most important thing you have to know about research is that you don't have to know everything. So definitely don't get stuck in the areas that you seem to like not understand at all. Just ask someone, or yeah, don't be afraid to ask people.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem.
What would you say is the biggest challenge in research?
That's a good question. I think I would say the part in research that you might feel like maybe this area is not for you, or you might kind of get discouraged, is when you feel like everyone is, let's say you try to tackle like a very niche area, and you feel like everyone's doing it and you have like no real impact out there. At least like for me, I would feel like if I'm not doing if it's not really making a change in the real world, then why should I do it? Why am I wasting time writing research papers and stuff that people are not going to read? Or why am I just like, yeah, spending the night coding and stuff like that for something that doesn't seem really important? So I think it really ties down to be able to overcome that discouragement of maybe your research might not have impact, is to really do something that you believe has impact. So always go back to like, if you really do believe that the problem you're trying to solve is important, then you're not gonna get as discouraged. You're gonna feel like this is worth my time. This is something that's gonna help. And in the end, you are gonna feel like you did something that was impactful.
Yeah. I actually have a different perspective from Catherine. I find the hardest part about research, specifically if you want to start your own research, like an independent research, is finding, like you find the problem, but you have to find, like, you know, how you kind of know like high level the problem you want to solve, but kind of finding the kind of methods to get to the solution that you want to get to. For example, like when I was doing deepfake research with Discover, we knew what we wanted to solve, and like we kind of knew generally like we wanted to use a certain class of methods. However, like because it was the novelty of the implementation and kind of methods out there, it was a lot of kind of like hard work in order just to understand like step by step what we have to do, especially in the experimentation phase where you have to kind of like start right up from scratch ideas that haven't even been tested yet. I find this to be the most difficult. In undergraduate research, though, when the problem's kind of formulated for you and things are given to you, the challenges become, the scope of the challenges become a lot smaller. It's more so just getting on the same page as the other researchers that you're working with is on. So 2 different challenges.
Thanks, guys.